Now that we've applied the roto brush, let's go ahead and work with it and make it more refined. Well, as you can see, we have an organic character, but the edge of this mat is pretty jaggedy. Now, some of you guys are going to see a little message here that says, in order to see this better, turn off this option right here, which is the alpha boundary. So you click on this little icon and it turns it off. But I'm actually going to leave mine on so you can actually see this little outline because it's important to see the changes. Now, under the matte category, we have something called smooth. You will change this based on the type of object that you've used the roto brush on. Now, as you can see, since this is a character, he's a rounded kind of thing instead of a chair, for example. So I want to smooth this out. I'll twirl this open. I'll grab this slider and move it all the way to the right. And look at the difference already. A nice smooth outline. Now, of course, you can go too far with that, so be careful and keep your eye on both. All right, use the slider and then go back and forth and look at the mask. But for now, I'll leave it as it is. You can also feather this if you want to, which will soften the edges if you want. So I'm going to leave it as it is. We also have a choke, which is going to increase or decrease how tight that mask is on your subject. So when I move the choke to the left, it moves away, and I can choke it closer to the subject so it fits right and tight on it. Sometimes it goes a little too far, as I said before, so you have to keep your eye on it. You'll notice that the ear lobe is sticking out. So I'll go ahead and pull the choke back a little bit, and I can work in conjunction with the smooth to really get that the way I want it to look. Now, by the way, guys, if you mess up, you have a reset button right here. So click on reset, and you're going to start right from the scratch. So I'm going to put this back on smooth and just show you that. We also, by the way, have something called refine matte that appears here. And these guys don't enable themselves unless you click on this little box. So I'm going to click on it, and now we have more options. And here's that message again. So to best view edge color decontamination, turn off the boundary. So you might be wondering, what in the world is decontamination? I mean, this guy is not exposed to radiation, is he? Well, not really. But decontamination, in the case of this effect, it pretty much talks about the foreground object picking up some pixels from the background. But we'll get back to that in just a moment. But once again, you click on this if you see that message and turn it off. But I'm going to leave it on for now. Now, what do we have here? We have a couple of things that, one makes sense, which is a blur. We have decontamination, and we also have chatter. What in the world is chatter? Well, chatter allows you to reduce any noise as a result of movement along the edges of your mat. So if you have a lot of noise going on in the background, the character's moving around, and you're picking up a lot of distortion, you can reduce that chatter with this slider here. So you can just take that slider and move it back and forth. Now, I don't have much chatter in this particular instance because he's in a background that's pretty obscured by only having one light source in this scene. So I don't have a bunch of leaves, for example, or like a helicopter taking off and a whole bunch of debris from the ground that could possibly cause any kind of chatter or decontamination. I also have something called motion blur. And with motion blur, what I can do is I can have After Effects use its super intelligence to automatically detect when there is motion blur in my object, and it will try to feather those areas so that they will appear at the edge of the mat. So you won't have any problems with motion blur. After Effects can actually deal with that in conjunction with your roto brush tool. As you can see here, you have a couple of categories. So you can work with the samples, and you can get the quality higher. So you can really work with that and have After Effects really study the footage and see what areas might be blurred as opposed to others. And last but not least, let me go ahead and actually close some of these. We have our decontamination. And the decontamination, once again, let me go ahead and just see if I can get more words here, allows us to work with the pixels that might be picked up in the background and mixed in somehow with your mat that you've created with your roto brush. As I mentioned before, debris from dirt, or let's say you have a character that jumped through a window, like he's a superhero, he's flying, so he smashes through a window, and you have all the glass and glitter and all kinds of stuff that somehow decontaminate this too much. So what we can do is we can use these decontamination sliders by twirling them open, and we can just experiment with them to try to clean it up a little bit more clearly. Now, one of the things about many of the tools inside of After Effects is that it's going to change what you use and how you adjust it based on your footage. That's just a fact of life, unfortunately. So it's impossible for me to say, all right, guys, what I want you to do is for everything you do, 50% decontamination, 20% chatter, and so on. It's going to depend on your lighting conditions. It's going to depend on the movement of your actor. It's going to depend on your background. It's going to depend on what's going on in the background, because the simpler your footage, the better chance the Rotobrush is going to get things right the first time. But if you have a whole bunch of stuff going on, you're going to have the Rotobrush do what it does best, and then you're going to have to help it out and come here into the properties and really refine that matte. And just one more tip I want to mention to you guys. Sometimes the Rotobrush does indeed lose its tracking on your object. So while you're using the tool, if you ever lose your tracking on an object, simply just stop your footage, go to the frame that's giving you a problem, and then use the Rotobrush again and help it to lock back onto that object, because that's inevitable. It depends on what's going on. So if you're trying to do a Rotobrush on Bruce Lee, for example, I'm pretty sure you're going to have a difficult time following those fists of fury. So that's an example that you might have a problem with. So hopefully you guys enjoy that. The Rotobrush is going to change how you use After Effects.